Hi, Jesse with eTrailer. Today we'll be taking a look at and I'll show you how to install the ETBC7 or our universal trailer wiring kit. This comes with a 7-way and a 4-way plug. We'll be installing that on our 2019 Subaru Forester. This is what it looks like once it's installed on our Forester today. As you see, it comes with a 7-way and a 4-way connector. So it's really nice if you're towing multiple trailers that have different style connectors. You won't have to carry an adapter around. And it's also really nice because it gives you the 7-way abilities of running a braking system with your trailer and also some auxiliary power out of it. You will need existing 4-pole wiring or install it before you get this installed. And you also, with this Subaru, need to install it in conjunction with a brake controller. This is a universal kit, so it works with multiple brake controllers. Today we installed it using the RedArc Tow Pro Liberty brake controller. As far as the install goes, you will have to get it mounted up, then run some wires into the engine bay. The kit comes with 3 different circuit breakers. You only have to use 2, but it's nice that it comes with all 3. And then we had to run some wires into the inside of the vehicle. So this is something that you're not looking to do yourself. Maybe you just don't have the time or the space. Feel free to check out our dealer locator. However, if this is something that you want to do yourself, feel free to follow along and I'll show you how we set up ours. Before we get started, you'll have to figure out a way to get a bracket mounted up for your 7-way bracket. I'm using a no drill bracket, which we have available here at eTrailer. So that I got that set up. I kind of figured out where I was going to mount it. And that helped me figure out the orientation that I mounted into our 7-way bracket here. Normally you would probably mount it like this, but with the way the Subaru is, it's gonna work better if I mount it like this, because that way all of my wires will be running over the hitch instead of under it, and that's just gonna keep them safer. So I'll get this mounted up. We just have some Phillips screws and some small nuts. Now we'll just go over all of our wires real quick. We have our 4-pole here that's going to plug into our 4-pole that's coming from the car. White is ground. Yellow is actually reverse light, which we're not going to use, so I'm just going to get that out of the way for now. We'll tape it up later. Our blue will be to our brake controller, and black will be power. So I'll get our 4-pole plugged in. I'll actually just cut this off. We don't need that anymore. And these two just plug together. However, once we get it plugged in, what I'll do is run a zip tie and tape them up just to make sure they're nice and secure. Now we'll take our sheathed wires that came in our kit. I just sliced down the middle with a razor blade so we can get access to our wires. I'll be connecting the black wire to our black wire and the white wire to our blue wire. We'll start by stripping each one. And our wires here come with butt connectors already connected. So I will just take this end here, put it in there, and crimp it down. That'll be the same process with our other 2 wires. Once those are connected, we will run some tape on the ends of them just to keep any moisture out. What we'll do next is I will run our wires up to the front of the vehicle and I'll come back and show you the route that we took. Now we'll go through how I got the wires all the way back. We just went up above our subframe here. Once we got past the subframe, I ran it into this little skid panel and stayed up above that. I had to remove this bolt, which is 12 millimeter, and then there's a few Phillips that I also removed. But it's just staying up above this skid plate where it's going to be safe. And I came out right here, and in order to run it up into the engine bay, I just ran a piece of airline tubing down and taped the wires to it and then pulled them up. You could also use something like a clothes hanger, but I just used what we have here at the shop. Now we need to find a good place for our ground. What I did was, they just have some rust-proof coating here. I scraped that off, cleaned it down to bare metal, and I'll take a self-tapper and get that screwed in. Now we're in the engine bay. This is where we brought our wire up. One thing to note is to make sure you stay away from the steering shaft there. So I zip tied it to that wiring harness just to keep it up out of the way of that. Now for our circuit breakers. There's going to be 3 circuit breakers in the kit. We're only going to be using 2 of them. Our brake controller that we're using is going to run off a 30 amp. And then the ETBC7 itself runs off a 40 amp. So I just marked that. It is written on the side, but once we get those mounted, it's going to be hard to read. So we just have to find a nice place for these to mount and stay. I'm going to plan on mounting one here, and then having another one here. And then once I get our wires hooked up, I'll make sure to run around the fuse box just in case somebody needs to access that. They don't have to move the wires out of the way. But we'll get those bolted down with the included self-tappers, just using a 1/4 inch socket. We'll just run 4 screws into the holes there, and we'll get those mounted up. Now for our circuit breakers, we have a few different size ring terminals. The smaller ring terminals will go onto the breakers. Then the large ones, these are for our battery terminal here. So what I have done already is I cut our black wire with just enough length to reach our 40 amp circuit breaker. Then with some slack, or with the scrap wire, I crimped a ring terminal on to the copper end, and the copper end will run to the battery. We're not going to hook that up yet. That'll be our last step. So I'm just going to kind of route out where I'm going to go with the wire. Again, we're trying to go around this fuse box here. So find a good spot, cut it, and then I'll crimp on the larger ring terminal. And then with our other one here, we're going to run the same style wire, black wire, coming to the battery also. And then I'll use what's left over of the black wire, put it on the silver, and then run it into the inside of the vehicle along with the white wire. Now that we have our circuit breakers sorted out, we'll run our 2 wires back, hide them behind the master cylinder here. We're actually going to go through this rubber grommet. I'll just cut a couple slices into it and feed the wires into the inside of the vehicle. Here's the inside where we came through that rubber grommet, and at this point we need to get our brake controller set up on our neighbor's car. Now we have to find a place to mount everything, not only the brake controller box but also our control knob. Luckily we have some empty blank plastic spots here, so I think it'll look just fine right there, and you don't have to worry about hitting it with your knee or anything. So we'll just get working on removing some interior panels here to mount our brake controller and the toggle switch. We'll start by removing this door sill here. This should just pull up. There's clips holding it in. Just work your way down the line. Set that aside. Now we need to get this kick panel here. There is a push pin holding it in back here. Use your trim panel tool, pop that out. And we'll see if this should just come out after that. Just a couple clips, pop those loose. We'll pop this side panel off just with a little trim pry tool. Might be easier to just peel this rubber and get it out of our way. Just try to find a spot where you can dig in. Should pop right out. Now there's a Phillips screw here that we'll need to remove. And there's another one in the footwell. We had to remove the hood release cable from the lever, and all you got to do is push this piece down, and then this piece here will kind of rotate and slide out. Now we'll just carefully pull everything apart. Should just be clips holding us in at this point. So I'll start here, work your way around the lower airbag there, and get everything pulled off. Once you have all the clips undone, don't pull it too hard because we will have to unplug all of these plugs here. So we'll just work our way down the line. They should all plug in essentially the same way. Just a push pin on the bottom and pull out. Luckily these are all color coordinated, but might make it easier to just keep everything kind of in mind and organized. So let's get all of these popped out, and then we'll be able to work with our panel here. Here's the back of that panel we just removed. We see a bunch of clips, so what we'll do is work our way around, push the clips in, and while you're pushing it in, kind of push out and work your way around. Eventually it should pop right out for us. Now here's the blank switch that we're going to use, so I'll just pop it out again. Should just be held in by a few clips. And then slide out. So there's a clip on each side holding it in. Here's what that blank switch looks like when it's removed from the panel. So what we'll have to do in order to get our new brake controller switch installed is I'm gonna have to cut out all of this little grid and this switch. The only thing I want to make sure I retain is the top and the bottom here, because we need these tabs in order to mount this back into place. So here's what that same fake switch looks like. I hollowed it out, just cut it with some clippers and then grinded it down with a drill bit. Then I found center, drilled a 3/8 inch hole there and a smaller 1/8 inch hole up top. That's for the light. So we'll take our new switch, should slide right into place. Make sure you get the light lined up with that top hole. And we'll take our nut included, get that started. And then we'll just tighten that down a bit with the socket. It's a 12 millimeter. Doesn't have to be super tight, just make it so that it won't fall out, and it's also centered. And then we can just put our cap there, and what you'll want to make sure is that you still get a click whenever you push in. Yeah, that's just making sure that you have enough clearance for it to properly work. Before we get all of our panels reinstalled, I'm going to get everything wired up. There's just more room to work with. So your wires will most likely be longer. This is just a plug that we had around the shop that I'm going to use. So I'll just go over the wires real quick. Our black wire will actually connect to the black wire that we pulled through the firewall. Our white wire, I found a nice factory ground that I'll connect that to. I'll just have to extend it out to reach it. Our blue wire connects to our white wire that we ran through the firewall. Our red wire, this one's a little tricky. There's a wiring harness that plugs into the brake light switch on the vehicle. So I had to go in there and test some wires, and I found out that the brown and yellow wire is the one that I need. That's the cold side of the brake light switch. So I will cut that wire and use a butt connector and splice into this red wire with that. Now here's all of our wires connected. I will clean up everything just to make sure there's no hanging wires so they don't get kicked or anything like that. I plugged it into the brake controller and found a good mounting point for the brake controller. Just use some double-sided tape, and I will also run a couple zip ties around it just to make sure it doesn't get bumped or moved. And I also plugged in our Ethernet style cable that will be routed up to where our knob is. At this point, we can hook up our 2 power wires that we connected through the circuit breakers, and then we'll go and put the interior back together and get to testing everything. Now we got our interior back together here. You can see our switch looks nice and clean on the inside of our Subaru. We have some flashing lights. It's just kind of getting calibrated, so you might want to hook up a tester, make sure all your lights and all that are working. But at this point, you can go for a drive, do some regular stops. You don't even really need a trailer hooked up, but really if you're making sure everything works, you might as well just hook up to a trailer, get this calibrated, and then you can kind of dial it in. And that's going to do it for the look at and installation of the ETBC7 Universal Trailer Wiring Kit on our 2019 Subaru Forester.